that VMware has missing. In high availability, they don't have anything to actually detect if you have a guest OS or application failure. Granted, they do for guest OS. If you install the VMware tools, they can catch if the guest OS actually crashes, if blue screens for Windows or panics for Linux. But outside of that, if an application goes deaf, dumb, or blind, they have no clue. They just merely continue going on. The reason why I bring this out is that most of the enterprise high availability products, if you've ever worked with those in the Unix space, actually do application monitoring and will ping or monitor the application's health. And if the application goes deaf, dumb, or blind, or has some problem, will generate an alert and automatically, based on policy, restart the application or move it to another node in order to get it running again and get it healthy again. Physical node failure detection, partial, meaning if you have redundant NICs, one of them goes bad, it's still communicating, it doesn't know, and it's not going to warn you or start to move workloads off of that particular box in preparation for some maintenance going on. Storage, virtual disk compatibility. What this means is that VMDK is VMware proprietary. It's not essentially compatible with any other hypervisor vendor, so you're essentially stuck. This is important from a perspective of vendor lock-in or lack thereof, if you want to have no vendor lock-in. Security, they don't have any configuration file integrity checking, but there are some third-party tools that you can deploy in order to accomplish this. As far as secure live migrate is concerned, they don't have that built into the product. However, you could build out a dedicated secure network just for live migration capabilities in order to accomplish that. And then vCenter does not have multi-factor authentication. Again, I believe it's Hyper. I'm going to say Hyper, but that's not it. Who actually, Hytrust, that's it. They're out on the show floor. Has a set of products that you can add to that if you want to do multi-factor authentication for the actual hypervisor itself. And then licensing. This is also an interesting area. For flexibility, it's nice if the vendor offers different modes of licensing. Most of the vendors will offer some form of a service provider license under a special terms and conditions for a service provider. But general licensing, you'll see that they don't have a physical server instance. Optional. Of optional features, storage. They don't have ISNS or SNS support, which it comes in handy sometimes. Security, they don't have TPM support, although I understand that that's something that is probably going to be appearing in the not too distant future for most of the hypervisors, not just VMware. And then para-virtualization. Of course, their para-virtualized drivers only work in the VMware environment. You'll see that the other two vendors we looked at actually share the same para-virtualized driver architecture and can use the same para-virt drivers in either hypervisor. And then licensing, again, they don't have a physical CPU core, and also they don't have a concurrently running VM instances. So let's take a look at Citrix Xenserver 5.5. This is interesting. As you can kind of tell from this, where did they focus? They focused on making sure that they would meet our criteria. The 5.0 release did not meet our criteria. Citrix took a look at that back earlier in the year and said, all right, we know what we're going to do for 5.5. You can see what they did. So, but there are some subtle differences that Chris will get into when we do the side-by-side comparisons later in this presentation. But I wanted to point out some things that they did. So what they have improved upon. They added directory services integration, which is something that we had put as required with role-based access control. Now, you might argue with us, okay, they don't have role-based access control in Virtual Center or Xenserver. But they do when you build it with the overall, this is the Platinum version, and what comes with the Platinum version is their Lab Manager product. This is essentially their OEM version of VM Logic's Lab Manager that's been rebranded. And Lab Manager has 14 different role-based access control methods that you can use in And so when you use Lab Manager in conjunction in the Platinum version, you do get these different roles that you can use for managing the Citrix Xenserver 5.5 environment. So we gave them a nod with that because it does give you the capabilities, and it is part of the package. It's not something that you have to buy separately or download separately. Then they've also added, as a result of some of these capabilities, dynamic load balancing as well. Now, the storage integration, this is an area where Citrix actually led with their storage link technology that they came out with in 5.0. And they also integrated with, they did the work to integrate with some of the major array vendors that are out there in the market. They also support SMIS, the storage management standard, although granted that's not really been widely deployed and widely used in the industry. Most of the vendors have some limited support for SMIS, but if they do have that support there, you can go through and integrate that. Now I mentioned that, although I didn't put it on the slide, mainly because you really, as an enterprise deployment, have to have support for that from the enterprise vendor. And until somebody like EMC comes out and says, yes, we will support our clearing of arrays, running under the storage link protocol using the link to our SMIS interfaces, then until that time, we're basically saying, well, that part of it's not really supported. But they did have, for some of these others here, they've actually done a pretty good job. And they led there because they came out with this prior to VMware coming out with vStorage and their integration they've done with storage arrays. It's a little lagging in the industry. So this is kind of, I like this. I like competition. It causes each to do the tit for tat with their releases. And who benefits? Customers. You guys benefit from this because it makes for improved capabilities across the board. OVM and SIM support, open virtualization format, is now in the Citrix Xenserver. It used to be a separate downloadable tool that was called the Project Kensho, as you can see from the screenshot there. Now, one thing that's interesting is when they first came out with this, we did not publish that they had met, when they came out with 5.5 in June, we did not publish at that time that they had met the criteria because they hadn't. One of the areas that Citrix was missing was their support model. They did not publish how long they would support their particular product in the market. What they did is they would release the product, and then sometime in the future, which none of you would know until it happened, they would announce that, hey, guess what? We're going to end of life this product in 6 months. Now, we did not believe that that was meeting criteria for a production-worthy type of product. Mainly because you need the time to actually do your planning for migrations and upgrades, as well as the budget planning throughout the year in order to do this. So you need at least a year's ahead, warning ahead of time. So after pushing on Citrix, they actually did change their support lifecycle policy, and they published that in mid-July. It was after they did that. This has been updated. You can go to their website and take a look at it. It's after they made those changes that we then finally gave them the nod for meeting the requirements. Now, they're missing definitely more than VMware of the preferred features. Same things as VMware for HA, I won't get into that. Live migration, they don't have capabilities. This is a ComparingHypervisor restriction at this point in time of being able to do extended or flex migration. This is essentially the ability, if you have in a cluster older servers and newer servers, to be able to dump down the newer servers automatically, so to speak, so that they can still do live migrations between them. As it currently sits, you have to have the same processor levels in all of your servers within a given cluster in order to do live migrations with Xen. Memory overcommit, this is a big one, especially when you're talking about desktop workloads. For servers, not as bad. If we were looking at this from the perspective of desktop virtualization, we're going to put that as a require. And until people get that into their hypervisors, they're not going to meet the requirements for desktop virtualization type workloads. And then large page table support. They only support your standard 4K pages. There's been some work in the open source community to increase that, but it's not in the mainline main versions of Xen that are being used by many vendors out there that are distributing Xen-based hypervisors. Networking, MAC address security, and then third-party virtual switch integration.